Hi, my name is Thea Star, aka Empress T of Empress Rare Publishing, where everything tells a story. Tonight, I am going to tell my story. As you see in the title, this series is called Chronicles of Singleness. I'm going to record everything and then I'm going to share it in parts. So you're going to see this series over a few days. This gives me very, very nervous. This is not easy for me in any way, shape, or form. I know people, look at those who do recordings and those who are online and thinking, yeah, those people are brave and, oh, this is nothing for them. But for some of us, it's really intense. So I guess I could say this is a disclaimer. A lot of people make assumptions when it comes to people being single over a certain age. And for this particular topic, it's going to be people who are over 30 and single. And single means not married. There are many dynamics to singleness, but singleness in this case means not married. So when you're over 30 and single, the questions that come with it, there are so many things that people say. A lot of it, about 95% of it is negative. They say things like, oh, well, in terms of the women, you ran away all the good men, or you're very picky, you don't think anybody's good enough, and all these different things. And I'm like, if you only knew. There are some people who get married because they want to have legal sex. Let's just put it out there. There's others who are tired of being lonely, so they find somebody and they just get married for getting married sake. But there are those of us who refuse to settle. When you're married, divorce is not an option. But when you're single, settling is not an option. One of the beauties of being single is the fact that I haven't settled. And as you're going to hear in my story, I could have on multiple occasions. There were many counterfeits, there were many jokers, time wasters, need I say losers, guys with no ambition, the list goes on. But I'm going to start my story at age 18. Before I turned 18, though, I'm going to give you a background. I was dating a particular boy because we weren't adults. It was a long distance relationship. And I remember I was around 15 when I first got a letter from him. So I had a cousin and I used to write to my cousin, how are you doing and everything, because he lived in another country. And this particular boy, one day, I didn't even know, he wrote a letter to me telling me that he's my secret admirer. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like I was super excited because anybody who knows me, obviously I love to write, but I also like to read. And to me, letters are like, I don't know, romance that needs to come back. Like it's part of the romance that needs to come back, writing letters. So I was like, when people take their time to handwrite, not type, not email, not text, handwrite a letter, that just showed so much. So obviously at 15, I was feeling myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I got a letter from this boy. I had a crush on him ever since. So we started to talk, we started to have, a time of, I guess, dating. When I would go down, I would see him, we would hang out. It wasn't a long time, but it was enough to obviously make an impact. So at the time that I was dating him, ex number one, I'm not going to call his name. I'm not calling any of the guy's name. And if I ever slip up, I'm going to edit it. I'm telling you from now. So if you hear a little thing that sounds off, that's me cutting their name out. But I remember we were all part of the same village. And I remember when he knew that I was with this particular boy, he was like, oh, um, he's a tree monster. He's not even cute. I don't know why you like him. And he just went off and whatever. And I'm like, well, that's your business because you're not the one dating him. I am. So your opinions don't matter to me. Um, Eventually, me and that boy broke up, and I started to see ex number one. And obviously, when you're young, you don't know everything. Even when you're old, you don't know everything, but definitely as a teenager, you don't know everything. So, um, to say I saw red flags or whatever have you, no. Around 18, I decided to be a rebel without a cause. Not sure why, because especially living in the US, 18 is an adult. So anything that I did, it would be my responsibility to deal with the consequences. But for some reason, I gravitated towards this particular young man. I should have run for the hills, but I didn't. Instead, I ran into his arms. Oh my gosh. Just give me a second. This is so intense because it's like, okay, so just trying to remember everything. I know women are supposed to remember everything, but at times we don't, especially those things that are like irrelevant right now. Um, so I'm not sure how it happened, but I remember the date that he called me because one of the summers that I was there in our village, remember he's long distance, so he didn't live in the US. I gave him my number. I can't remember how. I really can't remember. Maybe I gave it to one of his cousins and he found out or whatever. But I remember the day that he called me. And I didn't really, I didn't like him at that point, but wasn't a bad looking guy. So I was like, hey. So he called me and he was like, oh, I want you to be my girlfriend. I freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, because I was like entering college and I was like, oh my gosh, I have my high school friends at the time thought it was so cool that I had like this, they call it like exotic boyfriend or whatever. So um, I told him yes. And then we started, I wouldn't call it courtship. I didn't really know too much about that back then. We were dating, we were together. He was my boyfriend. I was his girlfriend, or so I thought. And I'm going to let you know more about that. So it was a certain month of a certain year. I don't want to give away my age. But he asked me to be his girlfriend. Everything was wonderful, yada, yada, yada. Then time passed and I went back um, to the village and we went on our first official date. That date should have been the moment where I ran literally for the hills, or just ran like Josephine, which is a female version of Joseph, if you know the story of Joseph. Joseph. And I should have ran like Josephine, but I didn't. So we went to this particular place. It was nice setting. Um, would I say it's romantic? I don't know. It. I don't think it would be classed as romantic, but maybe at that age I thought it was. But we went to the place and I remember he was like, okay, so I know that you said that you're saving yourself for marriage, but yes, I said, but there is, and the location we were, it was like overlooking the beach and different parts of that island. So I was able to see a good amount of the landscape and the different villages from that location because it was on a height. And he was like, okay, if you look further down in that particular area, if you want, I can book us a hotel room. Now, no one goes in a hotel room for a Bible study, okay? And the reason I said that is because this young man grew up in church, and yes, he proclaimed to be a Christian. I remember the day that he got baptized. That was way before we started talking or I even noticed him in that way, but I remember the day he got baptized. So as far as I knew, my little 18-year-old self, he was a Christian. So when that came out of his mouth, I was like, oh no, how my stance, I'm saving myself for marriage. And he was like, well, we're getting married someday, so why not? I was like, no, whatever. And that night, um, I had my first kiss. I was 19 at the time. Yes, I was very old, whatever, because for me, any type of intimacy, I deemed it as important for my husband only. So yes, I was young, but I thought that guy, that's why he's ex number one, ex fiance. I thought he was going to be my husband. So when he kissed me, I was like, you know what? Then you start to rationalize, or in your mind, you start to compromise. Well, he's going to be my husband, so why not? But on the flip side, it was my first kiss. I had a kiss before, but this one was like I would say like my first official kiss. So I remember going home and telling my sister, and she was like, why are you so happy? Like, why are you so excited? And she was like, oh yeah, it's your first. How was it? And I was like, oh my gosh, it was like the most epic. It was at that time, it was great for me. So time passed, and um, I wouldn't say things started to go downhill yet, but he would make certain comments about me, how I look. Um, One of the things he told me I should do surgery in a certain part of my body because he found it was too big. And I was like, but I thought that you loved or appreciated me for how I look. But why do I need to change any part of me for you? He was like, yeah, I know, but it would look better if it was smaller. And I was like, I'm not sure what kind of guy would complain about that part, but okay. Obviously, I didn't get any surgery. Like, that's just ridiculous. I think getting surgery on your body unnecessarily doesn't make any sense. Um, so he would say certain things. He would say, another thing he said, oh, you're going to be a 40-year-old virgin or whatever. And I was like, well, whatever you say, it's not going to give you um, any key to my, inner parts. So, and I stuck along, I stayed in the relationship, very naive, and I would say very stupid. I could look back at my younger self and said I was very stupid. Thank God for Jesus though. So after he made fun of me, he called me all kind of names. There's so many different things that happened. I remember I was very determined to have confirmation that he was my husband. So I remember the exact spot I was. I pray to God. I said, God, I need you to confirm that this is the man for me. I'm going to look up. I said all this in my mind because when you pray certain words aloud, obviously the enemy, the devil hears too. So I prayed in my mind. I was like, God, if this is the man for me, then this is going to be the sign. So I think I was like, let the sun go down quick or something. I can't remember, but it was, and I remember it happening. Mind you, that does not mean that was God's response. But in my mind, I kind of like conjured up something like, yep, this is it. This is the sign that I was looking for. We continued. Every time I went to church, there was a particular older lady who he claimed said, we look good together and whatever have you. And then something strange happened. So I was up here, I was in the US and getting ready to go back to the village for to celebrate like New Year's and whatever have you. So I remember telling my boss, I'm not coming back because I'm going on vacation. That time it was like a temporary job, and it was like, if you leave now, you're not going to be able to get the job after. And I was like, whatever. Mind you, I could have probably been a manager, but when you're young and you think that you're in love, but it's really lost. Okay. And so I went, I remember I had my dress. I know he liked glasses. And I've been wearing glasses since I was a child, so it wasn't like really anything drastic. But I remember I had this pair of glasses. I had on my glasses. I had my black dress, and I had on this scarf over because certain parts of you don't want to really highlight too much when you're church and stuff. So I had my little cover up, my black dress, my glasses, looking all cute, my hair done. So we went to church, rang the new year, whatever have you. And I remember there was this particular young lady in the church. She was grilling me, grilling me, grilling me, grilling me. So I thought she was looking at me real hard. And I'm like, why is she looking at me like that? Like, I didn't do her nothing. I didn't hurt nothing, right? But you're going to find out what I did, even though I didn't know I was doing it. So after the church service, I went by his house and he asked me, we were just sitting there in his gallery and just talking about, being happy to ring in the new year and stuff. And I remember he asked me, he was like, so what did you think about that situation with the young lady? I'm like, what are you talking about? He was like, yeah, did you find anything strange? I was like, yeah, I find she's real jealous. I'm not sure why she was looking at me like that. And he was like, yeah, she liked me or whatever, and she probably jealous of you because we're together and whatever have you. So I was like, well, that's not my problem. If she likes you, she was younger than us by a couple of years. So I was like, first of all, she's too young to be with you anyway, so I'm not sure why she has a crush on you. But, and then he was like, yeah, but that's nothing, don't worry about it, however. I was like, I'm not worried. So time passed. We went to celebrate. Can't remember if it was the same year or another time, but just for time's sake, just condensing everything. We went, it was supposed to be a family gathering, but I didn't know. I didn't understand this fact because I grew up here. I grew up in the States. So I didn't understand that a family gathering in the Caribbean meant an all-out fete. Maybe there's some family gatherings that are actually family gatherings, but this was like a fete. I'm talking about, I saw over 100 people there. And I'm like, I know families are large, but how is this a family gathering? Anyway, so you'd have done some things that I'm not proud of that night. My conscience was heavy. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I was enjoying it. I didn't care. In my mind, I was like, God is going to forgive me anyways. So I did what I did, and I had no remorse until we went to church the next day. So I came back home, my family home in the Caribbean, and had myself, everybody's like, where were you? So I was like, I was around because I'm always in my house. So I guess they thought I was home the whole time. Anyways, I remember we went to church. All of us who was at the party, the family gathering. So my ex and his cousin, I think his sister was there, his brother. And I remember it was communion time. And his father is one of the leaders or elders in the church. So I'm not sure if he knew because as I said, I had moments that I was very naive and stupid, so I didn't know everything. But they refused to take the communion. It didn't phase him. That should have surprised me. But when I told him no, he looked at me like, you too? And I felt so guilty. So guilty. And it was later on I understood what the purpose of communion is. Um, but at that time, I didn't take it because I felt like the worst sinner of sinners. We didn't even do, the do, but I just felt so dirty. I felt guilty. And to this day, that's a moment that is like etched in my memory because I'm like, wow, um, I knew what I was doing was wrong. And I still chose to do it. And it really affected my, you know, with the communion. That was a big deal to me. To other people, they might be like, whatever, but it was a big deal to me because it reminded me that I was doing some things that I should not be doing. So time passed, whatever have you, and he told me that he was going into the army. So I was like, okay, cool, that's nice, because he's always talked about going into the army. So it was like a big shocker. But what came along with the army is the need for, yes, sex. He called me, or I called him, I can't remember, because this man was like, if you see in the dictionary, cheapskate, that was him to a T. And some people could be like, well, maybe he didn't like you enough to spend money. If that's the case, whatever, he was a cheapskate. So most of the times, he only called me 3 times in our entire time of dating. And we dated for like 2 to 3 years on and off. And he called me 3 times. The day that he asked me to be his girlfriend, I believe my birthday, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the day he broke up with me because he ended it. And he was like, well, all my batchmates and stuff, their girls is here, but you're all the way there, so nothing can happen. I need my woman to do, so I can be sent off good. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, my stance, no sex before marriage. So I'm not sure why this is coming up. And he was like, oh, um, this don't make no sense. However, I convinced him or whatever to stick around. He's like, I don't know why you want to hold on because you're not giving me what I want and whatever have you. We were like planning to be married in a particular year. I remember he made a comment and he was like, oh, when I come to the States, I'm gonna find a girl just like you. So I was like, what do you mean you're gonna find a girl just like me? I'm me. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, what I mean, like a nice friend. I'm like, what are you really saying? Okay, so there were so many red flags. I remember one time where I actually, after that New Year's experience, I realized who he really was. People were telling me, but I didn't believe them. And back then, I didn't know about the spirit of discernment in terms of like, how to operate in the spirit of discernment and stuff. So I just counted as they don't know what they're talking about. One of the persons was my uncle. He wasn't a Christian at the time. So I was like, well, I'm not taking any ungodly counsel because one of the ladies in my church up here, she was like, well, if your uncle is not a Christian, then he should not be able to advise you on anything. So I took that to heart. But just because a person is not a Christian doesn't mean they don't have insight on life. I'm not saying to take counsel from them, but some people who are unsafe have insight on life. Okay. And I know that my uncle was looking out for me, but I wanted to do whatever I want. So I ignored him. Um, so I remember I was like, no, I need a proper sign to know if this guy is who he says he is. Is he like putting on a facade? I need something. I remember we were going on a date, and I kid you not. Um, in there's some guys who have like words on their cars, like I don't know, Douglaman or best thing or whatever. I don't know, whatever the guys have, gals them sugar, whatever it is. And I remember it so clearly. A car was passing. I was standing on the road waiting for my ex so we could go on our date. And I remember the car, and the car was driving by, and across the entire front of the car, it said Pretender on it. And literally less than 10 seconds later, my ex walked behind that car. And I was like, first of all, I I know that guys have up, you know, weird or crazy words and stuff on their cards. But I don't know, why would any man want to say that he's a pretender? Like, this is a known fact. This is not like, they have some of them might have player or something, okay, player. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that's a known, like, this guy's a player. But to say pretender, that has a different, that's a, like, next level. And for him to walk by seconds later, I was like, that's not a coincidence. That was the sign that I needed. And at that time, my feelings I just started to pull back from him. Piece by piece, I just started to pull back because I was like, so I remember he came up and he was like, what was wrong? I was like, oh, nothing. Because I was still in my mind trying to put the pieces together, like, because I never broke with a guy. So I'm like, how am I going to break up with him? I don't know why I was worried about protecting his heart or whatever, but I was. And so when he called me, or when I called him months later, and he was like, you know, this this is it. This relationship doesn't make sense because you're not giving. Basically, that's the premise of it. You're not giving me what I want. You live too far. I don't get to see you and whatever. So this is done. That was like the first time in my life that I was heartbroken and I cried over a guy. I remember bawling, bawling my eyes out. I was so hurt and devastated because I was like, this is a guy I thought I was going to marry. We were planning a wedding. He would have, as much as he was a cheapskate, he gave me a few things here and there, things that I cherished. And when he broke up with me and his reasoning too, I was like, wow, wow. If there was a prize for this, you would have number one. If there was a prize for heartbreak, uh, for being heartbroken by a man with no ambition. But it didn't stop there. Remember the girl I was talking about earlier in this video? So flash forward a few weeks later, we were planning to go on a camp in another island. And he was like, well, this is before we broke up. He was like, I'm not going to no camp because I could spend that money to for bricks for my house. He don't have any house, but he said that. And I was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Everybody can, use their money for different things, but something like this camp, it was like a youth camp to learn more about God and stuff. I don't think you can put a value on that. So I'm like, you're comparing growth in God to bricks, right? And anyway, I didn't say anything at the time because when we were together, I was like, I'll just see you when I come to the village. But by the time, obviously, the camp came around, we were done. So somewhere towards the end of the camp, the young lady came up to me. Mind you, I was in no headspace to have any kind of conversation with anybody concerning anybody. So when she came up to me, I was just like, I was in. straight up defense. First of all, I was heartbroken. I was annoyed and I was in defense mode. So that entire camp, um, there was one particular guy who spent the time talking to me, and we dated for 2 weeks. That's not even worth a story, but we did. So at camp we were talking, and then after camp ended, we dated for like 2 weeks. Um, but she approached me and she was like, "Oh, let me ask you about so and so," and I was like, "We're done." Like, and then she's like, "Oh, he has another girlfriend." I was like, "Come again?" Because as far as I know, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. But if you break up with somebody and you're already in a relationship with somebody else seconds later, that means you're already in a relationship with that person before. Because yes, people move on, but there's no way you could be in a whole other relationship when you just broke up with somebody. So that means that girl was there before. So she's like, "Yeah, he has another girlfriend or whatever." And I was like, "Well, okay." So she was like, "So you and him was dating?" I was like, "Yes, we were. We were together for so and so years, this date to this date and stuff." She was like, "Well, that was my boyfriend too." And I was like, "Come again?" And again, you remember I told you she was younger than us. So I was like, first of all, why is he dating that young girl? But I think in some cultures it's different, you know, not really a good thing. But yeah, she was like, "Yeah, that's my boyfriend." So she was like, every time we came around, he would pull back from me. He don't want to talk to me. He's not answering my calls. He don't come around. And then she was like, "Yeah, my cousins and my sister and brother was laughing at me because every time you came around, he all up on you and stuff or whatever." I was like, "Well, duh, because he was my boyfriend." She was like, "Well, he was dating both of us at the same time." And then she was like, "I'm sure he was talking to other girls too." And I was devastated because I could have felt her hurt and anger. But I told her, I was like, "Let me tell you something, girl. I don't mean any disrespect. I am not any side chick for anybody. I would never willingly go with someone, with anybody, if I know that guy was with someone else, because I respect people's relationship." So I told her I'm sorry if that's how it went down, but I literally had no idea. I was like, "Do you really think if I knew that he was dating you, that I would date him too?" I was like, as much as, some people have the notions of American girls or whatever have you, I'm not like that. I value people's relationship. And I apologized to her. Some years later, we ended up living, when I moved back home to study, we did end up living on dorm together as roommates. And we just clicked. We weren't like besties, but we, talked and we hung out or whatever. And we laughed about our shared ex. It was so pathetic. Not that we laughed, but that the fact that we had a shared ex, it was very pathetic. But yeah, we laughed about it. It was like, so I remember when she told me that she was um, dating her now husband. I was like, "Good for you, girl, because our ex." So it was just, to this day, if I see her, that's like our, we always have some underlying joke. That's our joke, that we have a shared ex, and he's a loser with a capital L. Okay, and he didn't stop there. There's about a few other times he tried to connect with me when I went back to the village. About 2 years later, he asked me for my number because he wanted to talk about whatever happened between us. And I was like, "Okay, cool," because at that time I already started to talk to someone else. So it didn't really bother me. I was like, "Yeah, if you want to apologize, apologize." He never showed up to wherever we were supposed to meet. So I was like, then another time when I was in school in my country, he asked, I think it was my sister, for my number, and she called me. She was like, "Oh, should I give him?" I was like, "Sure, whatever. I have nothing against him." Um, he, I think he called, and I was like, "Okay, cool, whatever, whatever." somewhere in between those times, every item that he gave me, I either cut it up, throw it in the garbage, or put it to burn. You know, those places that have like bushfires, I put it to burn. So I didn't keep any of the items that he gave me. Deleted the pictures and whatever have you, because I don't want any memory. I didn't want any recollection of us. I think my memory is memory enough, if that makes sense. So no pictures, no text messages, no nothing, no gifts. Got rid of all those. That helps. Getting rid of the items that the person gave you or anything that you share, phone, text messages, emails, whatever, delete it. Easier said than done, but it really helps to get over someone. So you would think that it was quote unquote over between his fake pursuing. Years later, and years later meaning like a few years ago, he, I was walking on the street with my cousin and my dog, Milano. Yes, I can call his name because that's my dog. My puppy, even though he's not a puppy anymore, but so I was walking my cousin and my dog, and my cousin was like, T, T. She was like, look, he driving and thing. I was like, okay, good for him. You know, the road is for everybody. I don't care. And then, lo and behold, Mr. Man park his car. I remember exactly where he parked it to be. Park his car. Good night, Tiesta. So my cousin and my dog went ahead. My cousin in the back, she laughing, 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 laughing. I was like, if this little girl don't stop. So he come up to me, he was like, nice seeing you and thing. I was like, how may I help you? And he was like, oh, I just wanted to, I see you walking with your cousin and your dog. I just wanted to walk with you and just talk and stuff. So I was like, are you for real right now? I was like, we're not friends. Like, I'm not sure what you think is gonna happen right now. Why are you talking to me? And he was like, oh, why you have to behave that way? Um, I'm just trying to be nice and stuff. I was like, well, I said goodnight. I'm not sure what else you want from me because we're not friends. We're not even acquaintances. There's nothing for us to talk about. And I was like, as a matter of fact, you getting out your car to say you want to come and walk with me makes absolutely no sense. I said, do you make any sense right now? I said, you have a vehicle. You see me walking with my cousin. Don't you think the manly thing to do, it was night too, it was nighttime. I was like, don't you think the manly thing to do would be to ask us if you can drop us where we're going? Instead of saying, oh, let me walk with you at night. I said, I didn't go in my mind. I was like, you have a whole vehicle and you stop, park the car to ask the woman if you can walk with her and you can drop her. That doesn't even make any sense. And I was like, you know what? Just, I will continue to be cordial, but please don't have any conversations with me because we're not friends and you're not making any sense at all, ever. And then he went on, oh, why you have to be able to blah, so. And I was like, you know what? Have a good night. And I bid him adieu. And I called my cousin and my dog and I was like, let's go back home. And he drove off. You know, little cousins or little children in general. She wasn't really a child, but she was young, early teens. She laughed, laughed. All the way home, she was laughing. I was like, girl, this is not funny. This is just sad. However, when I went home, I was laughing it off. I laughed my head off. I told my mom, I told my sisters, I told my friends, I even told my father. I was like, how pathetic is this guy? And I was like, how much does the enemy think of me. I mean, I don't care what he think of me. I was like, he actually thought he can bring my ex to what, tempt me or something? No, this, no. Wow. So that didn't make any sense. But that was the end of ex number one. Again, I did not share every detail, but it was just horrible from day one because this man was a pathological liar. He could have been in the room with his mom and his mom called his name and he would say that's not his name. That's how much he lied. This man was a pathological liar. And I was like, wow. And I was like, this is crazy. It was, that whole experience was like absolute craziness. But it didn't stop there. Oh, it did not stop there. So as this video continues, I'm going to share with you, or you will see it next time, but I'm going to continue about ex number two. And X1 is called Pathological Liar. But this one, that's Mr. Toxic. He was toxic, but I'll let you know about it. So thank you for joining me in this part of the video, this part of the series. And stay tuned for X number two, because I'm telling you, it gets even more intense. We became Facebook official.